Blood spattered across the weathered wooden floor of the Iron Horse bar, each crimson droplet telling a story of violence that would forever change the small desert town of Redemption, Arizona. Axel Stone, president of the Death Valley chapter of the Hells Angels, knelt beside the unconscious woman, her delicate features barely recognizable through the bruising and swelling. The silence in the usually rowdy establishment was deafening as patrons shrank away from his fury. "Who did this?" he growled, his voice cutting through the stillness like a serrated blade. The handful of patrons still lingering at 2 a.m. averted their eyes, nobody willing to answer the most feared man in 3 counties. When the leader of the Hells Angels carried her broken body from the bar that night, nobody dared to stop him. And by sunrise, the man who had beaten Catherine Morgan within an inch of her life would learn exactly why nobody crossed Axel Stone and lived to tell about it. If you love forbidden love stories, subscribe and don't miss the next one. The small desert town of Redemption had always been a crossroads, truckers, drifters, and outlaws passing through without leaving much impression. But for Catherine, it represented escape. As the town's only defense attorney, she had spent 3 years building a reputation for taking cases nobody else would touch, cases that often put her at odds with the criminal elements that flourished in the shadows of the Mojave. Tonight had been different. The warning had come in the form of a brutal beating, punishment for agreeing to represent a teenager caught in the crossfire between rival gangs, a message delivered with fists and boots that her principles would get her killed in a town like Redemption. Axel had been watching her for months. The beautiful lawyer with steel in her spine who dared to stand up to men twice her size in courtrooms and dive bars alike. Their paths had crossed occasionally, professional adversaries with a tension that ran deeper than either would admit. But seeing her crumpled on that barroom floor awakened something primal in him, a protective fury that would rewrite the rules of his world and hers. The back room of the Iron Horse had fallen silent the moment Axel burst through the doors, his reputation preceding him like a shockwave. The weekly poker game between rival gang lieutenants and corrupt local officials scattered like cockroaches exposed to sudden light. Only the bartender, a wizened old biker with loyalty to no one but his own survival, remained in place, polishing a glass with methodical movements. "She came in about an hour ago," he offered without being asked. 3 men followed her inside. Never seen him before. Axel's eyes narrowed as he gathered Catherine's limp form into his arms, careful of her injuries. Her breathing came shallow and uneven, blood matting her auburn hair where it had spilled from a gash above her temple. Even unconscious, her face carried a determined set to the jaw that spoke of the iron will that had first caught his attention months ago. "Description?" he demanded, shifting her weight against his chest. Out-of-towners, expensive watches, cheap suits. One had a scar like a fishhook under his right eye. The bartender avoided direct eye contact. They said something about sending a message, about staying away from the Carson kid's case. Understanding dawned coldly. The Carson case, a 16-year-old caught with enough heroin to put him away for decades. Catherine had taken it pro bono, claiming the boy had been set up. Her investigation had been stirring dangerous waters. Axel's leather cut creaked as he adjusted his hold on Catherine, her blood already staining the president's patch on his chest. "If anybody asks, you never saw either of us tonight." The bartender nodded once, sharply. "Far as I know, the lady left alone, and you were never here." Outside, the desert night enveloped them in merciful darkness as Axel carried Catherine to his Harley. His vice president Razor materialized from the shadows, eyes widening at the sight of the unconscious woman. "That the lawyer?" he asked, already reaching to help secure her. Axel nodded grimly. "Get Doc to the compound. Tell him it's bad." "Boss," Razor's voice lowered. "You know who she is, what bringing her into our world means. I know exactly who she is." Axel's tone left no room for argument as he kick-started the engine. "And I know exactly what I'm doing." As they roared through the empty streets of Redemption, Catherine's broken body cradled against his chest, Axel felt something fundamental shift within him. For 15 years, the club had been his only family, his only loyalty. The Angels' code was simple: brotherhood above all, women as property or pleasure, civilians as necessary collateral in a war fought in society's shadows. Yet something about this woman, this crusading attorney who'd stood in courtrooms arguing against everything his club represented, had pierced the armor he'd spent a lifetime building. Perhaps it was her refusal to be intimidated, her willingness to fight alone against forces that would crush most men. Or perhaps it was the recognition that beneath their opposing positions, they shared something essential, an uncompromising code, a willingness to pay the price for their convictions. The compound gates opened at their approach, brothers materializing from various buildings as word spread of the president's unexpected cargo. Axel carried Catherine directly to his private quarters, ignoring the questioning glances and muttered concerns. "Nobody touches her," he announced to the assembled members, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. "Nobody speaks her name outside these walls. As of tonight, she's under my protection." One prospect, newer to the club's hierarchy, dared to voice what others were thinking. "She's a lawyer, boss. She's put 3 of our brothers in prison." Axel's gaze locked onto the young man, cold and unblinking. "She's a lawyer who was beaten half to death for defending a kid who couldn't defend himself." His voice dropped dangerously. "And whoever did it just declared war on me personally." The sun was beginning to paint the eastern sky when Doc emerged from Axel's quarters, wiping blood from his hands with a stained cloth. The president stood from where he'd been waiting, tension evident in every line of his body. 3 broken ribs, concussion, internal bruising. The former Army medic's assessment was clinical. Defensive wounds on her hands and arms. She fought back hard. She'll live, but she'll hurt for weeks. Axel nodded once, jaw tight. "Nobody enters this room except you and me. Clear?" "Clear, boss." Doc hesitated. "But when she wakes up, a defense attorney in the Angels compound? She'll think she's been kidnapped." A ghost of a smile crossed Axel's face. "Oh, I'm counting on it, Doc. I'm counting on it." As dawn broke over the desert, 3 Angels rode into redemption with murder in their hearts and their president's orders burning in their ears. Find the men with the expensive watches and cheap suits. Find the one with the fishhook scar. And by sunrise, no man would dare speak Catherine Morgan's name in anything but fearful whispers. Catherine awoke to unfamiliar surroundings. A sparse but clean room with heavy blackout curtains and the distant rumble of motorcycles. Pain radiated through her body as memories flooded back. The ambush outside the Iron Horse, the savage beating, then darkness. She tried to sit up, wincing as her ribs protested with sharp, stabbing agony. "Doctor said you shouldn't move for at least a day," a deep voice observed from the doorway. She squinted through her one good eye to see Axel Stone leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed over his broad chest. His Hell's Angels cut hung open over a black t-shirt, revealing intricate tattoos climbing up his forearms and the unmistakable bulge of a knife sheath at his belt. "Where am I?" Her voice came out as a rasp, her throat dry from hours of unconsciousness. "Somewhere safe." He crossed to a small table, poured water from a pitcher. "My compound." The realization sent a jolt of fear through her. The Hell's Angels compound was legendary in legal circles. Few outsiders entered, and fewer left with their free will intact. She'd spent 3 years prosecuting members of Axel's club before switching to defense work. Now she was at their mercy. "Why would you help me?" Catherine accepted the water cautiously, years of courtroom experience with criminals making her wary of unexpected kindness. Axel's expression hardened. "Someone used you to send a message. I want to know who." "So I'm your informant now?" Despite her injuries, her lawyer's instinct for negotiation surfaced. "Why would I tell you anything?" A dangerous smile crossed his face. "Because whoever did this will try again. And next time, they'll make sure you don't wake up." She looked away, knowing he was right. The beating hadn't been random. It had been calculated, professional, a warning that had stopped just short of killing her. It was related to the Carson case, she admitted. I'm representing Danny Carson's son, 16 years old, caught with drugs that weren't his. Axel's expression shifted subtly. Carson works for the Serpents. Their territory borders ours in the East Valley. His son is just a kid, Catherine argued, used as a mule without understanding what he was carrying. And you're the bleeding heart trying to save him. It wasn't a question. It's my job. It's going to get you killed. He moved to the window, checking the perimeter in a gesture so practiced it seemed unconscious. The Serpents don't play by any rules, not even the unwritten ones. Catherine attempted to stand, gasping as pain shot through her leg. Axel was beside her instantly, his strong hands supporting her elbows. The unexpected gentleness in his touch contrasted sharply with his fearsome reputation. The Serpents sent 3 men to deliver their message, he said, voice low. My boys found them this morning. The implication sent a chill through her. What did you do to them? Nothing they didn't deserve. His eyes held hers, challenging. Does that bother you, counselor? I believe in justice through law, not violence. Yet the law didn't protect you last night. I did. His logic was infuriatingly simple. Their faces were inches apart, his eyes, cold blue like desert sky, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. For a moment, something electric passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits operating on opposite sides of a divide. The moment shattered at the sound of motorcycles roaring into the compound. Axel moved to the window, his posture tensing. Stay here, he ordered, already heading for the door. Lock it behind me. Through the gap in the curtains, Catherine watched Axel stride across the compound to meet 3 riders. Their urgent gestures and his darkening expression told her something had gone very wrong. When Axel returned minutes later, the dangerous energy radiating from him made the small room feel suddenly airless. The Serpents know you're here, he stated flatly. They've put a price on your head, and mine. Seems you've made some very powerful enemies, counselor. I need to leave, she said, reaching for her torn jacket. This isn't your fight. His hand caught her wrist, gentle but unyielding. It became my fight when they spilled blood in my territory. His gaze held hers, unflinching. And it became personal when that blood was yours. The declaration hung between them. A dangerous admission from a man who ruled his world through calculated control rather than emotion. Catherine felt a fundamental shift in the ground beneath her feet, as if the universe had realigned around this singular moment. Why would you risk yourself, your club, for me? She asked. I've stood against you in court. I've helped put your members away. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. You did your job, fought for what you believed in. I respect that, even when it works against me. He released her wrist, but remained close. The Serpents crossed a line. In our world, women and children are off limits. What they did to you. A muscle tightened in his jaw. It violated a code older than both our professions. So this is about honor among thieves? She asked, not entirely able to keep the skepticism from her voice. This is about lines that shouldn't be crossed, he corrected, and what happens to those who cross them. Outside, the compound had erupted into activity. Men checking weapons, reinforcing gates, preparing for conflict. She had sought justice through law books and courtrooms. Axel Stone delivered it with chains and bullets. 2 different worlds colliding in a desert town too small to contain the coming conflagration. They'll come for me, she said quietly. They won't stop until they finish what they started. Let them try. His voice carried absolute certainty. My brothers have guarded this territory for 20 years. Nobody takes what's under our protection. The possessive undertone in his words should have alarmed her. Instead, Catherine found herself drawn to the sense of security it offered. A primal, visceral safety she'd never experienced in her carefully constructed legal world. Before she could respond, a sharp knock came at the door. Axel opened it to reveal a wiry man with a face marked by years of hard living. "Got something, boss?" he said, glancing curiously at Catherine. "Found the car the attackers used. Nevada plates. Registered to a shell company tied to the Serpent's operation in Vegas." "Good work. Double the perimeter guards tonight," Axel ordered. "And get word to our Vegas charter. I want everything they know about Serpent operations near our territory." After the man left, Axel turned back to Catherine, his expression grave. "Get some rest. You're safe here for now. Tomorrow, we figure out our next move." "Our next move?" she echoed. A smile that didn't reach his eyes crossed his face. "Welcome to my world, counselor, where justice moves faster than court dockets, and verdicts are non-negotiable." As darkness fell over the compound, Catherine lay awake in the strange bed, listening to the sounds of men preparing for war. Her legal training told her to be appalled, to reject everything these outlaws represented. Yet beneath that professional veneer, something primitive responded to their direct approach to justice and to the inexplicable pull she felt toward their dangerous leader. By morning, the first battle lines would be drawn in a war she never intended to start. A war where the only rule was survival, and where her carefully constructed beliefs about right and wrong would be tested against the harsh reality of a world where only power and loyalty truly mattered. 3 days passed with Catherine healing inside the fortress of the Hells Angels compound. 3 days of learning the rhythms of a world she had only ever observed from across courtrooms and police interrogation rooms. The club operated with military precision under Axel's command, prospects running errands, patched members handling security and rotating shifts, everyone moving with purpose and loyalty. She hadn't expected from men she'd previously dismissed as mere criminals. On the 4th morning, she found herself sitting on the clubhouse porch, watching the sunrise paint the desert in watercolor hues. The swelling in her face had subsided enough that both eyes could open, though her body still ached with every movement. "Your face is improving," Axel observed, appearing silently beside her with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Is that your attempt at flattery?" She accepted the mug, surprised by the small smile her retort earned. "Just an observation." He settled beside her on the bench, an appropriate distance between them that somehow still felt intimate. "Doc says you're healing well." The doctor was a former Army medic who patched up bullet wounds and knife cuts without asking questions, another contradiction in the complex ecosystem of the club. Catherine had initially resisted his care, but her practical nature eventually won out over pride. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." Axel nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "The serpents have gone quiet. Too quiet. That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be." He sipped his coffee, the morning light illuminating the lines of his face. Evidence of a hard life, of violence given and received. "We need to move you, soon. Somewhere they can't find you." The thought of leaving brought an unexpected pang of reluctance. "I have cases. Clients who need me. You can't help anyone if you're dead. Counselor." The blunt assessment hung between them. Catherine studied his profile, the strong jaw perpetually shadowed with stubble, the scar that bisected his right eyebrow, the permanent vigilance in his posture. Axel Stone was every inch the dangerous outlaw her profession had taught her to oppose, yet he had shown her more protection than the entire legal system she served. "Why did you really help me that night?" she asked, the question that had lingered since she'd awakened in his compound. He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he turned to face her, something vulnerable breaking through his carefully maintained walls. "I recognized something in you," he admitted. "Something I don't see much in my world." principles, courage. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Stubborn determination to do what's right, regardless of consequences. I could say the same about you, she countered, just with different definitions of right. His laugh was unexpected, a deep rumble that transformed his face from intimidating to almost boyish. Fair enough, counselor. A comfortable silence settled between them as they watched the desert come alive with morning light. Catherine became acutely aware of his presence beside her, the subtle scent of leather and sandalwood, the controlled strength in his relaxed posture. I grew up in this town, he said suddenly. Watched my mother work 3 jobs to keep food on the table after my father drank himself to death. The system you believe in? It never helped people like us. The confession surprised her, a glimpse behind the president's patch to the man beneath. Is that why you joined the club? He nodded. The angels were the only ones who gave a damn about the forgotten ones. We protect our own. By operating outside the law. By creating our own, he corrected, with rules that actually get enforced. Cross us, you pay. Help us, you're protected. Simple. Catherine found herself nodding, understanding his perspective even if she couldn't fully endorse it. And where do I fit in that black and white worldview? Axel's gaze intensified, something shifting in the air between them. That's the problem, counselor. You don't. You've created a third option I didn't account for. Before she could question him further, a prospect approached, his expression urgent. Boss, we got trouble. Serpents spotted at the edge of town, armed. Axel was on his feet instantly, the brief moment of openness vanishing behind the president's mask. Get everyone on alert. Double the guards. No one in or out without my say-so. As the compound erupted into defensive preparations, Catherine felt the fragile connection they'd built threatened by the approaching storm. Axel turned back to her, his expression grave. Stay in my quarters. Lock the door. There's a gun in the nightstand if you need it. I don't use guns, she reminded him. Something between frustration and admiration crossed his face. Then pray I don't get shot protecting your stubborn principles, counselor. Hours passed in tense waiting. Through the window, Catherine watched armed bikers taking positions throughout the compound. The legal world she'd inhabited seemed distant now, replaced by the stark reality of men preparing for violence without the pretense of judicial process. When gunfire finally erupted at the perimeter fence, she flinched at the sound. Whatever illusion of safety she'd cultivated these past days shattered with each report. This was the true face of the conflict she'd inadvertently stepped into. Not motions and briefs and legal arguments, but bullets and blood. The firefight lasted 20 minutes that stretched like eternity. When silence finally fell, Catherine couldn't bear the waiting any longer. Against Axel's explicit instructions, she slipped from his quarters and made her way toward the main building. She found him in the makeshift infirmary, his cut removed, shirt torn open as the medic worked to extract a bullet from his shoulder. His face remained impassive despite what must have been significant pain, his focus entirely on issuing orders to the men around him. When he spotted her in the doorway, his expression darkened. I told you to stay put. I heard the shooting stop, she explained, moving closer despite his glare. I wanted to help. Help by following orders next time. I don't take orders, remember. Different definitions of right. Something flickered in his eyes, frustration melting into reluctant amusement. The medic finished bandaging his shoulder, and the other men tactfully withdrew, leaving them in relative privacy. The serpents tested our defenses, Axel explained, reaching for a clean shirt. Looking for weaknesses. Looking for you. Catherine's stomach tightened. Anyone hurt? 2 of theirs dead, 1 of ours wounded. Nothing serious. He winced as he shrugged into the shirt. And this. Small price for the intelligence we gathered. She moved forward instinctively, helping him with the buttons his injured arm struggled with. The domesticity of the gesture struck them both simultaneously. Her fingers working up his chest, his breathing changing subtly at her proximity. "I can't stay here," she said quietly. "You know that. I'm putting your people in danger." His hand covered hers, stilling her movements. "My people choose their risks, Catherine. They understand what we're fighting for." "And what exactly is that?" she asked, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth radiating from his body. Axel's gaze dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second. Something worth protecting. The kiss lingered between them, unspoken, unrealized, but present in every glance and gesture as the days passed. Catherine found herself drawn deeper into the angel's world, helping Doc tend to injuries, learning the complex hierarchy and codes that governed this alternate society. The club members who had initially regarded her with suspicion began to accept her presence, some even seeking her legal advice for problems that straddled their world and the legitimate one. A week after the firefight, Axel found her in the compound's small library, a surprisingly well-stocked room that belied the club's anti-intellectual reputation. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. About Danny Carson's case. Catherine set down the legal text she'd been reviewing. "What about it?" "My sources in Vegas confirmed what I suspected. The kid was set up." Axel handed her a manila envelope. "The Serpents are using minors as drug mules because they face lighter sentences if caught. Danny's son refused to play along after the first run. The drugs he was caught with were planted in his locker as punishment." She examined the contents: surveillance photos, transaction records, statements from unnamed sources, evidence that would never be admissible in court, but told a compelling story nonetheless. "This confirms what Danny's son claimed," she said, mind already working through legal strategies. "But I can't use any of it in court." "No," Axel agreed. "But now you know who you're really fighting, and why they came after you so hard." Catherine studied him, realization dawning. "You've been investigating this the whole time I've been here." He shrugged, the gesture failing to mask the significance of his actions. "You believed the kid was innocent. Seemed worth looking into." The simple statement carried weight she couldn't fully process. This outlaw had taken her professional judgment seriously enough to mobilize his own resources, despite their opposing sides. "Why would the Serpents risk attacking me over one kid's case?" she asked. "It doesn't make sense." "Because it's not just about Danny's son." Axel's expression darkened. "They're establishing a pipeline through redemption, using kids from the reservation and the poor side of town. Your investigation was getting too close to their operation." The scope of the conspiracy staggered her. "We need to take this to the district attorney, the FBI." "And tell them what? That the president of the Hells Angels gave you this information?" His laugh was without humor. "They'd dismiss it without a second look, and you'd paint a bigger target on your back." He was right, and they both knew it. The frustrating reality of their separate worlds. "Then what's our next move?" she asked, unconsciously adopting his terminology. Something shifted in his eyes at the word "our," a subtle softening. "We need to get you out of town until this blows over. I have connections in California, people who can keep you safe while we deal with the Serpents." "And the Carson case?" "Your legal assistant can file for continuances. Once the Serpents are handled, you can come back and finish what you started." The plan was logical, practical, yet something in Catherine rebelled against running away. "I've never backed down from a fight, Axel. I'm not starting now. This isn't a courtroom battle. This is life and death." His voice hardened. "The Serpents won't stop, not after we killed their scouts." "Then we use the law," she insisted. "If I can build a case against their operation, expose what they're doing with these kids. While you're building your case, they're building your coffin." Frustration edged his words. "Why can't you see that your precious legal system isn't equipped for this fight?" Because admitting that means everything I've dedicated my life to is meaningless. The words burst from her with unexpected force. If the law can't protect these kids, can't protect me, then what am I fighting for? The question hung between them, raw and honest. Axel's expression softened as he moved closer, his hands coming to rest gently on her shoulders. "You're fighting for justice," he said quietly. "Same as me. We just use different weapons." The understanding in his eyes undid her carefully maintained professional distance. Catherine found herself leaning forward, her forehead resting against his chest as the enormity of their situation washed over her. His arms encircled her cautiously, mindful of her healing ribs, providing comfort she hadn't allowed herself to seek. "I can't abandon these kids," she whispered against the solid warmth of him. "I can't let the serpents win." His hand stroked her hair, the tender gesture at odds with his fearsome reputation. "Then we find a third way, together." The promise hung between them, sealing something neither was ready to name. A sharp knock shattered the moment. Razor, Axel's vice president, stood in the doorway, his expression grim. "Sheriff's here," he announced, "with warrants." Outside, 3 police cruisers idled at the compound gates. Sheriff Miller, a man Catherine had faced in court dozens of times, stood with hand ostentatiously resting on his holstered weapon. Axel strode out to meet him, Catherine following despite his warning glance. "Stone," the sheriff acknowledged coldly, his gaze shifting to Catherine with poorly disguised shock. "Ms. Morgan, interesting company you're keeping these days." "What do you want, Miller?" Axel's tone was neutral, but carried underlying tension. "Got warrants to search these premises. Reports of a shooting last week. Evidence of harboring a fugitive." He held up the papers with unconcealed satisfaction. "What fugitive?" Catherine asked, lawyer instincts kicking in. Miller's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You, Ms. Morgan, there's a warrant for your arrest as well. Obstruction of justice. Evidence tampering in the Carson case." The fabricated charges struck her like a physical blow. "That's ridiculous. I've done nothing wrong." "Tell it to the judge." Miller gestured to his deputies. "The serpents send their regards. Said you should have taken the first warning." Understanding crystallized with terrible clarity. The sheriff was on the serpent's payroll. The warrants were a pretext to get to her and to search the Angels' compound for their operations. Axel stepped forward, his body subtly positioning itself between Catherine and the sheriff. "These warrants look highly irregular, Miller. My lawyer will want to review them before we allow any search. Stand aside, Stone, or I'll add interfering with an officer to the list." The standoff crackled with dangerous energy. Angels members had emerged from various buildings, outnumbering the deputies, but mindful of the legal consequences of confronting law enforcement directly. Catherine touched Axel's arm lightly. "Let me handle this," she murmured. Then, louder, "Sheriff Miller, I'll come with you to sort this misunderstanding, but you should know these warrants won't hold up." "Catherine," Axel began. "It's okay," she interrupted, her eyes conveying a message she hoped he understood. "This is my world. Let me fight this battle." Conflict raged across his features, the instinct to protect warring with respect for her expertise. Finally, he nodded once, barely perceptible. "My lawyer will meet you at the station," he told Miller, "within the hour." As the sheriff cuffed her with unnecessary roughness, Catherine maintained eye contact with Axel, drawing strength from the cold fury in his gaze, not directed at her, but at those who threatened her. "Don't do anything rash," she warned him quietly, as Miller led her toward the cruiser. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Wouldn't dream of it, counselor." But something in his eyes, a dangerous calculation, a predator's patience, told her that Sheriff Miller had just made the gravest mistake of his career. By sunrise, the balance of power and redemption would shift irrevocably. and Catherine Morgan would discover just how far Axel Stone would go to protect what he considered his. The holding cell in Redemption's sheriff station smelled of disinfectant and despair. Catherine sat on the metal bench, mentally reviewing statutes and precedents that would dismantle the fraudulent charges against her. The legal battle ahead was clear in her mind, a path she'd navigated professionally dozens of times. What she couldn't predict was what Axel might do. 3 hours had passed since her arrest. No phone call, no attorney. Sheriff Miller had conveniently disappeared after processing her, leaving a deputy who claimed ignorance about her rights to counsel. Classic intimidation tactics. They weren't holding her for prosecution. They were holding her as bait. The cell door opened unexpectedly. Deputy Evans, a young officer she'd cross-examined in court before, stood there with keys in hand and unease written across his face. "You're being released, Ms. Morgan," he said, avoiding eye contact. Sheriff's orders. Suspicion flared. Just like that? What about the charges? Dropped, for now. The deputy's discomfort was palpable. "Someone's waiting for you out front." Expecting Axel or one of his angels, Catherine was surprised to find Assistant District Attorney James Porter in the lobby. His tailored suit and polished shoes looked out of place in the small-town facility. "Catherine," he greeted her, professional but warm. "I came as soon as I heard. This is completely inappropriate." "James." Relief washed through her. Porter was one of the few prosecutors she respected. Tough, but ethical. "How did you know?" "Let's talk outside." He guided her through the door, waiting until they reached his sedan before continuing. "The warrants were never properly filed. Miller was operating without authorization from my office." "He's working with the serpents," she stated flatly. Porter's expression remained carefully neutral. "That's a serious accusation. It's also the truth." She studied him. "Why are you really here, James? Your jurisdiction doesn't normally cover redemption." He started the engine, pulling away from the station. "Someone very powerful made a call. Suggested I might find evidence of corruption if I looked into Sheriff Miller's recent activities." Axel Stone, she realized aloud. Porter didn't confirm or deny. "I don't ask questions when tips lead to dirty cops. But I am curious how you ended up at the Angels compound." Catherine weighed her response carefully. "They protected me when the law couldn't." "You're walking a dangerous line, Catherine." His concern seemed genuine. "These people aren't misunderstood rebels. They're organized criminals. They saved my life." The simple truth that had rewritten her understanding of good and evil. Porter sighed. "Where can I take you? Home?" "The compound," she said without hesitation. His eyebrows rose. "You can't be serious." "It's the only place the serpents can't reach me." A partial truth. The full reason, her growing connection to Axel, remained her private reality. The drive passed in tense silence. At the compound gates, Razor waited with watchful eyes. Porter stopped short of the entrance. "This isn't a game, Catherine. You're an officer of the court getting involved with a criminal organization. You're risking everything. Your career, your reputation." "I know exactly what I'm risking," she replied quietly. "And why?" Inside, she found the compound unnaturally quiet. Only a skeleton crew of prospects remained, cleaning weapons with methodical precision. No sign of Axel or the patched members. "Where is everyone?" she asked Razor after Porter's car disappeared down the desert road. "Handling business." His cryptic response carried weighted meaning. "Boss said to keep you here. Safe." A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "What kind of business, Razor?" He avoided her gaze. "The kind that ends problems permanently." Understanding crashed over her. Axel had moved against the serpents, and likely Sheriff Miller too. The carefully negotiated peace between rival organizations was shattering because of her. "Take me to him," she demanded. "Can't do that." Razor's tone left no room for argument. Boss's orders. People could die tonight. People were going to die anyway, he countered. The serpents made their choice when they came after you, when they corrupted the law you believe in. The brutal logic silenced her momentarily. This was the reality of their world. Direct action, consequences delivered without the buffer of legal proceedings. In Axel's quarters, Catherine paced like a caged animal. Her legal training screamed that she should contact authorities, prevent whatever vigilante justice was unfolding. Yet another part, a primal, honest part, recognized that the system she'd dedicated her life to had already failed. Failed her. Failed Danny's son. Failed all the vulnerable kids the serpents were exploiting. Hours crawled by, each minute stretching her nerves thinner. Just past midnight, engines rumbled into the compound. She rushed outside to find angels returning in small groups, faces grim but satisfied. Some bore minor injuries, cuts, bruises, one with a hastily bandaged arm. Axel was the last to arrive, his Harley roaring through the gates with Razor and 2 other officers flanking him. Blood spattered his white t-shirt, whose blood she couldn't tell. His expression was remote, unreadable as he dismounted and strode toward her. Without a word, he pulled her against him, his embrace fierce and claiming. She felt the tremor running through his powerful frame. Adrenaline, relief, something deeper he wouldn't name. "It's done," he murmured against her hair. "What did you do?" she whispered, already knowing the answer would change everything between them. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. What was necessary? In his quarters, he stripped off the bloodied shirt, revealing fresh bruises across his torso. Catherine helped him clean up, neither speaking as she gently wiped away evidence of violence from his skin. The intimacy of the act, tender care after brutality, created its own gravity between them. "The serpent's operation is finished in redemption," he finally said. "Their local leader won't be a problem again, ever." The finality in his voice told her everything she needed to know. "And Sheriff Miller?" A cold smile touched Axel's lips, currently explaining to FBI agents how evidence in dozens of cases disappeared from the station's lockup, and why he has offshore accounts filled with serpent money. "You contacted the FBI?" Disbelief colored her voice. "Your friend Porter did, with evidence we provided." He caught her questioning look. "We don't trust the feds, but sometimes their enemies align with ours." Catherine processed the calculated pragmatism behind his actions. "So, the children the serpents were using..." "Will be safe now," he finished. "And Danny Carson's son should have his charges dismissed by morning." Porter gave his word. Relief washed through her, followed by a more complex emotion. Axel had accomplished through violence and intimidation what might have taken her months or years of legal battles, if she'd succeeded at all. "Does that bother you?" he asked, reading her expression with uncanny accuracy. "That I did what your courts couldn't?" "Yes," she admitted honestly. "And no, the law should have protected these kids, should have protected me. But it didn't. No. The admission cost her something vital, a certainty about right and wrong that had defined her professional life." Axel's hand cupped her cheek, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man capable of such violence. "You don't have to choose, Catherine. Your way or mine. Maybe the world needs both." The wisdom in his words resonated deeper than she expected. "Is that your way of saying you respect what I do, even while breaking every law I've sworn to uphold?" A rare smile transformed his face. "Maybe it's my way of saying I respect you. All of you. Not just the lawyer, but the woman who fights for what she believes in, who doesn't back down, even when beaten." The declaration hung between them, honest and unvarnished. Catherine felt the last of her professional detachment crumbling in the face of this unexpected connection. This bond forged in violence but transcending it. "Stay," he said simply. Not an order, but a request. Vulnerable in its directness. She should refuse. Should walk away from this dangerous intersection of their worlds before it destroyed everything she'd built. Her career, her reputation, her understanding of herself. Instead, she closed the distance between them, her lips finding his in the answer words couldn't adequately express. The kiss deepened into something hungry and reverent simultaneously. Acknowledgement of the impossible space they'd created together, where outlaw and lawyer could meet as equals. Outside, the desert night wrapped around the compound like a protective cloak. Inside, two people from opposing worlds discovered that sometimes justice and vengeance, protection and possession, danger and safety could exist in the same moment, in the same touch. By morning, Catherine Morgan would have to face the consequences of her choice. The legal community would whisper about her connection to the angels. The fragile peace Axel had enforced through blood would require constant vigilance. But tonight, in the sanctuary they'd carved from violence and principle, none of that mattered. Tonight belonged to them alone, the defender and the outlaw, finding unexpected common ground in a world determined to keep them apart. Act Fee. The choice rain fell over Redemption for the first time in months, washing away desert dust, and, symbolically, the blood spilled during what locals had begun calling the Night of Reckoning. 2 weeks had passed since Axel's strike against the Serpents. 2 weeks of Catherine living in the liminal space between her former life and whatever was emerging from the ashes. In her small law office downtown, she reviewed the dismissal order for Danny Carson's son. The document represented everything she'd fought for, justice for an innocent kid. Yet it had come at a price she never anticipated paying. Sheriff Miller had been arrested on corruption charges. 3 deputies were under investigation. The Serpents operation had dissolved, their surviving members fleeing back to Vegas. And throughout Redemption, people whispered about the defense attorney who now moved under the protection of the angels. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. District Attorney Victor Hamilton, her former boss and mentor, stood in the doorway, disapproval evident in every line of his face. "We need to talk, Catherine." He closed the door firmly behind him. She gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "I've been expecting this conversation." "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" Hamilton didn't bother with preliminaries. Associating with Stone and his thugs, living at their compound? The Bar Association is already asking questions. "I haven't violated any ethical guidelines," she replied calmly. "I haven't represented Angels members. I haven't compromised any cases." "It's not about technicalities." Frustration colored his tone. "It's about appearances, about the integrity of the legal system." "The same system that failed to protect me?" She leaned forward. "That was corrupted by Sheriff Miller? That wouldn't have helped Danny's son without Axel's intervention." Hamilton's expression softened slightly. "I understand you've been through a traumatic experience. That stone helped you when you were vulnerable. But this path you're on, it leads nowhere good." "I disagree." She met his gaze steadily. "I've seen both sides now, Victor. The law has limitations. Sometimes justice needs enforcement." "Listen to yourself," he said quietly. "You're justifying vigilantism, violence." "I'm acknowledging reality." She gestured to the dismissal order. "Danny's son is free because Axel exposed corruption your office couldn't or wouldn't see. How many other innocent people are caught in similar webs?" Hamilton stood, disappointment evident in his posture. "The DA's office is launching a formal investigation into your relationship with the Angels. In the meantime, I'm advising all departments to sever ties with your practice." He moved to the door. "You were one of the best, Catherine. I hope you remember that before it's too late." After he left, Catherine sat motionless, the rain drumming against her window like nature's judgment. The professional consequences were beginning, exactly as she'd expected. The question now was whether justice for Danny's son and the other children the serpents had exploited was worth the cost to her career. The door opened again without a knock. Axel stood there, leather cut gleaming with raindrops, his presence commanding even in the professional setting of her office. "You heard?" she asked, knowing his sources were everywhere in town. "Hamilton making his move?" He nodded, crossing to perch on the edge of her desk. "Expected. He's trying to save face after his office missed the corruption under their noses. He's not wrong about the consequences." She gestured to the leather-bound law books lining her walls. "Everything I've built is at risk." Axel studied her carefully. "Having second thoughts?" "Not about what we did," she clarified, "about what comes next." Understanding dawned in his eyes. They had existed in a bubble these past weeks, the aftermath of crisis, the intoxication of their unexpected connection. But reality was reasserting itself, forcing them to confront the fundamental incompatibility of their worlds. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "There's something you need to see." They rode through the rain on his Harley, Catherine's arms wrapped around his waist, her face pressed against his back. The physical connection had become natural, necessary, a tether in the storm of uncertainty surrounding them. He drove not to the compound, but to the poorer side of Redemption, where weathered trailers and small houses clustered along unpaved roads. At a community center built from cinder blocks and determination, he cut the engine. Inside, Catherine found a dozen children, ages ranging from 8 to 17, engaged in various activities: homework, basketball, art projects, a few adults supervised, including Doc from the compound. "What is this?" she asked, watching a young girl carefully complete an algebra problem while a teenage boy explained the concept. "Angel's Youth Program," Axel replied, pride evident in his voice. "Started it 5 years ago. Kids from broken homes, foster care, the reservation. We give them somewhere safe after school, tutoring, meals." Disbelief and confusion warred within her. "The Hells Angels run an after-school program?" "We protect our community," he said simply. "Not just through force. These kids, they're one bad decision away from becoming prospects for gangs like the Serpents. We show them another way." As she watched, she recognized one of the adult supervisors, a former client she'd defended on drug charges 3 years ago. He'd turned his life around, apparently finding purpose in mentoring these vulnerable children. "The club funds all this?" she asked, struggling to reconcile this reality with her preconceptions. "Most of it. Some donations from local businesses who understand what we're preventing." Axel's expression softened as he watched a small boy proudly show Doc a completed math worksheet. "The Angels saved me when I was not much older than him. Gave me family, purpose, identity. But times change. We need to evolve." The admission that even within their outlaw code, change was necessary struck Catherine deeply. Here was evidence that Axel's world wasn't purely defined by violence and criminality, just as her legal world wasn't purely defined by justice and principle. "Why show me this now?" she asked. "Because you're at a crossroads." His eyes found hers, intense and honest. "Choosing between your world and mine. I wanted you to see that they don't have to be completely separate." Outside, they stood under the building's small awning, watching rain transform dust to mud. The parallel to their situation, transformation through turbulence, wasn't lost on either of them. "I can't abandon the law," she said finally. "It's part of who I am, even with its flaws." "I wouldn't ask you to." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "Just as you wouldn't ask me to abandon my brothers." "So where does that leave us?" The question encompassed everything: their personal connection, their professional opposition, the uncertain future stretching before them. "It leaves us creating something new," he said, certainty in his voice. "A partnership. Your legal knowledge might. Alternative methods of persuasion. Protecting those who fall through the cracks of your system." The proposition should have horrified her legal sensibilities. Instead, Catherine found herself considering its practical merits. How many clients had she lost to a system that favored the wealthy and powerful? How many injustices had she been unable to correct through legitimate channels alone? "The DA's office will come after me," she warned. "The Bar Association, too. Let them try." His confidence was absolute. "We've faced worse odds." The "we" resonated between them. Acknowledgement of a bond that transcended professional identities. "I need time," she said, "to figure out what this looks like, how to balance both worlds." "Take all the time you need." He brushed rain-dampened hair from her face. "I'm not going anywhere." The gesture, tender amid their serious discussion, broke through her remaining hesitation. Catherine leaned forward, her lips finding his in a kiss that felt like a decision, a commitment to something larger than either of them individually. Later that evening, in the privacy of Axel's quarters, they created their own sanctuary from the conflicting demands of their separate worlds. The physical connection between them had grown from tentative to certain, each touch an affirmation of their unlikely bond. "They'll never understand," she murmured afterward, her head resting on his chest. "My colleagues, your brothers, they'll see us as betraying our respective sides." His fingers traced patterns along her spine. "Maybe, or maybe they'll recognize what we already have, that true justice needs both law and enforcement, structure and strength." "Quite philosophical for an outlaw," she teased, earning a rumbling laugh that vibrated against her cheek. "Don't tell anyone. Bad for my reputation." Morning brought clarity and resolution. Catherine dressed in her court attire, a power suit that represented her legal persona, while Axel watched from the bed, his expression appreciative but questioning. "Hamilton's formal review starts today," she explained, applying the professional armor of subtle makeup. "I'm not running from this fight." Pride flashed in his eyes. "Never doubted it for a moment, counselor." At the courthouse steps, heads turned as Axel's Harley stopped at the curb. Catherine dismounted with practiced ease, ignoring the whispers and stares of legal colleagues. When Axel removed his helmet, the shock rippled visibly through the gathered attorneys. "You don't have to make a statement," she murmured, straightening her jacket. "Yes," he contradicted, taking her briefcase. "We do." Inside, the disciplinary committee had assembled. Hamilton, 2 senior attorneys, and a state bar representative. Their expressions registered collective disbelief when Axel Stone entered alongside Catherine, his leather cut a stark contrast to their conservative suits. "Ms. Morgan," Hamilton began stiffly, "this is a closed proceeding. Mr. Stone will need to wait outside." "Mr. Stone is my client," she replied smoothly, placing a retainer agreement on the table. "As of this morning, and as his attorney, I've advised him to be present for any discussion of my alleged ethical violations involving his organization." The legal maneuver, using their own rules against them, momentarily silenced the committee. Catherine felt Axel's subtle nod of approval behind her. "Furthermore," she continued, placing a thick folder on the table, "I've prepared documentation of Sheriff Miller's corruption, the Serpent's exploitation of minors, and the systematic failures of our local justice system that necessitated alternative intervention. I believe you'll find it enlightening reading." Hamilton's face darkened as he realized the corner she'd backed them into. To pursue action against her meant exposing their own institutional failures. To back down meant tacitly accepting her unusual alliance. "This isn't over, Catherine," he warned quietly. "No," she agreed. "It's just beginning." Outside, rain had given way to desert sunshine. Axel helped her secure her briefcase on his motorcycle, the ordinary action carrying symbolic weight before the watching legal community. "Think they got the message?" he asked, amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. Catherine glanced back at the courthouse. The institution she'd once believed represented perfect justice. Now she saw it clearly, an imperfect system created by imperfect people, necessary but insufficient alone. "I think they're starting to understand," she replied, swinging her leg over the Harley's seat. "That sometimes justice wears a suit, and sometimes—" Her arms wrapped around his waist, embracing both the man and the choice she'd made. "Justice wears leather." As they roared away from the courthouse, Catherine Morgan, defense attorney and unlikely ally of the Hells Angels, felt the boundaries of her world expanding. Ahead lay uncharted territory, a new definition of justice that borrowed from both their codes, a partnership that defied conventional categorization. By sunrise tomorrow, all of Redemption would know that the line between law and outlaw had blurred, that Catherine Morgan now moved through both worlds with equal confidence, and that anyone who threatened the vulnerable in their town would face consequences, both legal and otherwise. The woman who had once believed exclusively in justice through law had made her choice, and the man who had once believed exclusively in justice through force had made his. Together, they'd created a third path, one that promised both protection and principle for those who needed it most. 6 months later, autumn painted the desert in subdued golds and ambers. Catherine stood before the newly established community legal clinic on Redemption's east side, watching as volunteers unloaded donated furniture and office supplies. The modest storefront represented everything she and Axel had built together, a bridge between worlds, a sanctuary for those the system overlooked. Free legal services for victims of domestic violence, exploitation, and systemic injustice, read the hand-painted sign above the door. Below, in smaller letters, "Sponsored by the Morgan Foundation and Angels Community Trust." Axel appeared beside her, clipboard in hand as he directed prospects in organizing the reception area. The juxtaposition, the feared MC president handling administrative details for a legal clinic, would have been unthinkable a year ago. "Third client already called this morning," he informed her. "Single mother facing eviction after reporting her landlord for unsafe conditions." Catherine nodded. "Schedule her for tomorrow. I'll review tenant rights with her, draft a cease and desist." "And if legal channels fail?" The question carried no challenge, merely practical consideration of their established protocol. "Then we explore alternative remedies," she replied, the euphemism now comfortable between them. "Starting with financial pressure on the landlord's legitimate businesses." Their partnership had evolved into a seamless operation, Catherine exhausting legal avenues, while Axel's network stood ready to apply more direct persuasion when necessary. Both understood the boundaries, violence as absolute last resort, focused on protection rather than retribution, never against the innocent. The arrangement had cost them both. Catherine's corporate clients had disappeared, her reputation in traditional legal circles tarnished. Several Angels members had left the club, uncomfortable with their president's new direction. Yet for every loss, unexpected gains emerged. Clients who desperately needed advocacy, respect from community members who recognized the practical justice they provided. A new generation of Angels focused on protection rather than mere profit. "Mail came," Axel said, handing her a thick envelope bearing the State Bar Association's seal. Catherine opened it with steady hands, scanning the formal language of the Ethics Committee's decision. "Probation," she summarized. 1 year. I can continue practicing but under supervision." "Better than disbarment," he observed. "Much better than expected," she agreed. Hamilton must have decided a public fight wasn't worth the exposure. "Or he recognizes what we're building here has value." She smiled at his optimism, another unexpected facet of the complex man behind the fearsome reputation. "Maybe a little of both." Inside the clinic, Doc was setting up a small medical examination room, a place where domestic violence victims could receive care without fearing hospital reports. 2 Angels prospects arranged a children's play area in the corner, complete with donated books and toys. A former client, now volunteer receptionist, organized intake forms at the front desk. "Did you ever imagine this?" Catherine asked, surveying their creation. "When you found me at the Iron Horse that night?" Axel's arm slipped around her waist, the public display of affection now natural between them. "Not exactly, but I knew nothing would be the same." The memory of that night, of blood and violence that had ultimately led to unexpected partnership, hung between them. The brutal beating that had begun their story had faded to scars, just as the initial conflict between their worlds had evolved into something more complex and valuable. "The DA's office called again," Catherine mentioned. "Offered me a consultant position, working with their special victims unit." Axel's eyebrows rose. "Interesting strategy. Keep your enemies closer. Or genuine recognition that our approach is getting results." She shrugged. "Either way, it's an opportunity to influence the system from within while continuing our work here." Pride flickered in his eyes, pride in her resilience, her refusal to be marginalized despite the professional consequences of their relationship. Outside, a motorcycle convoy rumbled down the street, Angels returning from their weekly ride to the reservation, where they provided security for the women's shelter and mentored at-risk youth. The sight no longer raised alarm in Redemption. The club's evolution under Axel's leadership had gradually reshaped public perception, though they remained firmly outside the law in many operations. Catherine watched them park. These men she'd once viewed solely as criminals, now familiar as extended family. They existed in shades of gray, just as she now did, no longer the black and white moral certainty of her former legal perspective. "Council meeting tonight," Axel reminded her. "The expansion vote." She nodded, both anticipating and apprehensive about the discussion. The Angels were considering opening similar community programs in neighboring towns, extending their protection and resources beyond traditional territories. The old guard remained resistant, viewing such community service as distraction from profit centers. The younger members embraced Axel's vision of evolution, maintaining their independence while channeling their strength toward protection rather than predation. "They'll follow your lead," she assured him. "Our lead," he corrected, the simple amendment encompassing everything that had changed. Catherine Morgan was not officially an Angel, could never wear their patches or participate in certain aspects of club business. Yet her influence had become integral to their direction. That evening, in the clubhouse's council room, Catherine sat beside Axel as chapter representatives debated the expansion plan. Her presence there would have been unthinkable before, a lawyer in the inner sanctum of club deliberations. Now, it symbolized the new reality they'd forged together. When the vote passed narrowly, Axel's hand found hers beneath the table, a private acknowledgement of their shared victory. The Angels would expand their community programs while maintaining their essential character, evolution without surrender. Later, alone in their shared living quarters, Catherine watched Axel remove his president's cut, the weight of leadership momentarily set aside. In these private moments, they were neither attorney nor outlaw president, just 2 people who had found unexpected connection across seemingly insurmountable differences. "We're changing things," she observed, helping him with the buttons of his shirt. "Your world, mine, the town. For the better?" The question carried genuine reflection rather than certainty. Catherine considered honestly before answering. "Not perfectly, not completely, but yes, for the better." Outside their window, Redemption sprawled beneath desert stars, a town transformed not by law alone nor by outlaw justice, but by the unexpected alliance between them. Children slept safer, knowing predators faced consequences beyond ineffective courts. Victims found advocacy that didn't end with procedural roadblocks. And in the space between legal and illegal, a new form of justice had taken root. "Who did this?" Axel had growled that night at the Iron Horse, kneeling beside her broken body. The question that had launched their improbable journey. By sunrise the next day, no man had dared speak her name, fearing the angel's retribution. Now, 6 months later, Catherine Morgan's name was spoken throughout Redemption, with respect, with gratitude, with understanding that justice sometimes required both law books and leather cuts, both principle and power. The price had been high: professional standing, uncomplicated morality, the comfort of clear boundaries. But the promise of what they were building, a protection that transcended the limitations of either world alone, made that price worth paying. In Axel's arms, Catherine found the certainty that had eluded her in courtrooms and legal briefs. And in her principles, Axel found the direction to transform his strength into something more than mere dominance. Together, they had rewritten the rules of both their worlds. And Redemption was better for it. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and stay for the next ride.